Can you guys hear us on the call now?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
How do I sound? Do I sound great?
There's a little bit of an echo.
I think we should.
What about now? What about now?
That's worse.
Yeah, maybe.
Sorry.
Okay, is it decent?
Nice to meet you. That was a French truck. You should be good too.
Can you hear me okay?
French truck. Oh, that's
Yes.
weird.
Okay.
Since and all this company sponsored even stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, it's over there.
There,
Okay.
yeah.
Things up right at 10, you could just do a couple months left.
Hey, well, then I'd be,
You want to be on?
I'd be saying everything first. Yeah. I could sit on that crazy ball.
Whoever's doing the Wi-Fi requested again. Like. You get that.
Yeah. I was gonna say, yeah, my laptop's battery is just. Hopefully it'll make it. Or I can do this. Actually, maybe.
Yeah. Mark, just coming to you. There's some firewall issues. Program.
What is the mic, this thing?
Yeah, it's got like a 7 mics in it. Like a really.
I wonder if I should make it. Okay, can everybody on the call still hear me? Yeah, okay. So we'll start Saturdays with a warm up. So I'll give you guys about 5 minutes to work on that, and the instructions are on the screen right now and also in Slack.
Keep up. Sorry.
NWOE. Act license. And then for name, Matt. You can connect it. Sponsor name. What's your? Okay. Did you do that already? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You only do that one time, right? You only have to approve it once, right?
Oh, no, I can prove next time. But Mario's on his way.
Like
He has
next
to
week?
approve devices on the back end,
Ah.
so there might be a.
I was like, I haven't resend mine to get it accepted again. It's still not working.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
I mean, we don't need internet that bad. We will eventually. Like today. we get burned out. That's better.
Tell Mario to get your lease.
Okay, is anybody done? Anybody do it? Maybe? Okay. Do people want more time or do you want me to just give you guys the answer now? Okay. All right, so these warm-ups are a good gauge of if you're remembering what we've done each week. So you should have all the tools to be able to do this, based on what we've gone over so far. So, first thing, make an HTML file. So if you, are using VS Code, which I recommend, then you can have like a folder where you just keep all the stuff you work on in class. I'm going to be doing that inside the like folder that's linked to the OP Coders GitHub, but you guys would just have your own folder called like code or projects or something like that. And I would try to keep it organized by day like I do as well. So we're in day 2 of module 2. And so to make a new HTML file, you can just right click and then do new file within the folder that you want to make a file. And so this is just like in class dot HTML, and the dot HTML is important so that the code editor knows what kind of file you're writing. So you can see it automatically knows that, hey, you're doing HTML since it's the extension of HTML. All right, so so I made the file check on that first thing, and then add a heading with the content hello world. So any heading you want would have been fine. So we'll just put the minimal HTML stuff that we need here. And then I'll do an H1. And then I said, yeah. So hello world. You'll often see coders use hello world whenever they don't know what else to type. They just need some content. It's like got a long history of being like the first thing you have your program say to people and stuff like that. Okay, so check on part 2. I assume everybody's got this down. Okay. And then add some CSS or style the heading to your favorite color. So it's been a long time since I've done CSS, but I think I'll just do some inline style. Perhaps. And then I want to target the H1. And then I want to do color green. And to verify that this is working, you'll want to go live. So you should all have the live server extension. And so you can typically just hit go live at the bottom right to open up whatever file you're working on. All right, so crushed it so far. You may have been more liberal with your coloring of the header. You may have done like, I don't know, like the background as well if you wanted to. All right, and then add a script that prints to the console hello world. So this is the only thing new. Everything else should have been, you should have been able to do it from the last one. So, all right, how do I add a script to this? Yeah, so we can add a script tag, and it's like, where do I put it? There's a lot of different places you can put it. We'll do the bottom for now. And like, you can put it pretty much anywhere. So we'll just So like it could be in the body, it could not be in the body, it could be in the, what's up?
What's up, man?
Hey, what are you doing here on a Saturday?
It's Saturday.
Sweet.
No, I wouldn't get married.
Cool.
This is going on
Yeah, we're learning the code.
for you guys.
Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna put it, yeah,
Because like I was in that article we read about is like I always thought we put the script at the bottom. But then it said you should actually use the developer
yeah.
correct?
Yeah, that's newer. I didn't even know about that. And honestly, like once you get more advanced, all that stuff's kind of set up already for you. But the defer tag is like essentially putting it at the bottom. Like it's just like, so if you put a normal script tag at the bottom, it's not gonna load any of your code until it's already done everything above it, which would be like the HTML and the CSS that's above it. What you want to do, like if you had like you're not going to notice it now, but if you had like a massive script that had like a ton of code in it, all that code's going to run before the page has any visible content. So like in the old days, people would like if you did that, you'd like hit the page and then it would just be like spinning and you wouldn't actually see anything. And so you'd be like, what the hell's wrong with this page? And then all of a sudden the script would end running and then it would show the HTML. So like just as like a user experience thing, it's like put the scripts at the end so that the HTML shows up first and the user knows that the page is working. And then typically your script tag is going to reference the HTML. And so if the script tag loads before there's actually HTML on the page, then it may break because it's like trying to like look for a paragraph or look for a heading or something or look for a button. And so yes, that's why you typically put the script tag at the bottom. And defer is essentially just guaranteeing that the script tag will run at the end. And you can put the script tag anywhere. You use defer. Is my understanding from that reading, but that's pretty new, that defer stuff. All right, so we can do a script tag. And this would be another inline script tag. So I did like an inline style of here. And inline meaning just like I directly put my code inside the tag. And I can do that same thing with my code. Just put the code directly into the script tag. But you guys saw in the last module, you can also put like a style link to another CSS file and put your CSS in that file. And you can do the same thing with your code too. So we could just make a JavaScript file and then do a script tag that then links to that file. But for now, just because we're getting started, I'm just going to do the inline. So, all right. And all we needed to do was print to the console, hello world. So what is when I say the console, what am I referring to?
The developer tool thing.
Yeah.
Click on.
Yeah, so the console in the browser, if I open up this HTML file in the browser, and then how do I print to the console? Does anybody remember the command or the code for doing that? Yep. So I don't see anything yet, but that's because I don't have the console open. So I can do that by doing a little hamburger thing, more tools, developer tools. Or it's Shift Command I on a Mac to like auto open it, and like Control Shift I would guess on a Windows computer. Yeah, there's some of them will like no, I did the wrong thing. I always like, it's like muscle memory. I can't actually remember what the keys are. I think it's Command Option J. On a Mac, we'll go directly to the console. And there it is, hello world. So that was it. That was the exercise. So like, I guess, who was able to do all that? Okay, so like, I was hoping everyone would be able to do that. So obviously it's my fault that you guys couldn't do it. What like the people that couldn't get there, like what was the problem? Time or like you just like literally didn't know what to do or what was it? Don't be shy. You're in good company.
We were trying to get. So I didn't get a chance to look at it.
Okay. Anybody else?
I forgot to put quotes around, tax,
You forgot to put quotes around what?
around what tax in the.
Here?
Yeah.
Around the pencil log?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I love that. Yeah, because like you're not, when you write HTML, you don't have to do that, right? Like in HTML, it's sort of like the stuff inside the tag is all text. It's all a string. And like with the CSS, there's no quotes or anything there. But yeah, when you switch to a script, when you switch to programming language mode, JavaScript mode, you're writing code and there's only specific words that you can type in the code mode. But then if you're trying to deal with text content, yeah, that has to be. Issues. You got it?
Yeah, we just made one eye contact, so. Seemed like I didn't.
Okay, cool. So these exercises are a barometer for how you're doing. So like if we do the exercise and you can't do it, like speak up, get help from a mentor to like make up ground to be able to do that. All right. How was the free code camp material? So you should have done, I've got it linked up here now. Should have done, so like for this module, we're gonna do this entire basic JavaScript thing. So all 113. So it's about like 17 of these little mini courses per break. So you'll do like 17 by Wednesday, and then another 17 by Saturday is like about how it works out. So we did a little more than 17, so you should have gotten up to this finding a remainder in JavaScript. So yeah, everybody should have done that. How did that stuff go? Is that pretty easy? Went pretty well? Okay, it's gonna get way harder. But good, I'm glad it went well. So there was a few things introduced in here that we'll talk about. And I'll talk a little about a few more things that weren't covered in this. But are there any questions related to that curriculum? To start off. Okay. All right, so there's a few things that were introduced in the curriculum. One thing is variables. What is a variable? I'm gonna do this the whole time, so just get used to it.
Something that can hold the value.
Yes, something that can hold a value. Very good. So there's 3 different types of variables. Does anybody know those types?
Const, let, var.
Good, yeah. So the first type that was introduced, so like JavaScript is a language that came out, God, I don't know, a while ago. And it's changed over time. So they make mistakes and then they fix those mistakes and they like change the language over time. So like they introduce new stuff to the language, I think like every year roughly. So there's like different versions of JavaScript. And so when JavaScript first came out, the only thing there was var. So var was the only way to make a variable. And so if you want to make a variable, you say, hey, I'm going to declare a variable, and then you give it a name. So you just come up with a nice name for the information that you're trying to store. So if you're making like a form or something, like in the last class, we were talking about our resume form and like the contact name section. So if someone was using that form and inputting their information for you to contact them, you would need a variable to store the email that they give you. So you would come up with a good name for that typically because someone's gonna read the code or you're gonna read the code. And ideally it makes sense and it's human readable. So variable names are like a good way to document the information that you're trying to store. So for that field, you might do like email. You might just do email, or you would do, you know, our user interest email or something like that. I don't know. You might come up with a name. So the more descriptive the name, the better. But also, like, people are pretty lazy too, so like sometimes they don't make super descriptive names. But you can see here, often the variable will be more than one word, and so we would do what's called camel casing here to make it easier to read. So you start with lowercase at the beginning, and then for each additional word, you capitalize the first letter. So this is user interest email, and I can make a variable and not give it a value. You usually give it a value, but like sometimes you don't. And if you don't, it does have a value, but does anybody know what the value is? What?
No.
Close? No? Undefined, yeah. Null and undefined are pretty similar, but they're different. And so let's not worry about null. Let's just worry about undefined. Undefined is the current value of this variable. So if I console log this, it's undefined. So we'll go look at the console here. And we see we have hello world and then we have undefined. So, I mean, yeah, that's just what it is. It's a variable. It's undefined. There's no value to it. So we can give it a value. So I can do that up here, or I could do it later if we wanted to. So I'll do it down here. And so to assign or reassign a value to a variable, you just put the variable name and then you put equals. And then we give it the value that we want. So for this, that might be like my email. Okay. So some of you may have noticed that other people's code would look more like this. So like on FreeCodeCamp, you typically will see semicolons at the end of stuff. That's technically the right way to do it, but it's not how I do it, and it's not how some other people do it. I'm not saying who's right or wrong here, but you don't have to put a semicolon. And so if you just don't want to worry about that semicolon, because there's like specific rules for when you're supposed to use it or not that are honestly a little confusing at first, you don't have to use them. So like the code works the same way with or without it, assuming that you are typing things correctly. But like the semicolon is used to sort of say this is the end of a statement. But like if you do a new line, which is what like all of these statements are on new lines, that also makes it like a separate statement. So these are like 4 distinct lines of JavaScript that all do something different. So the first one logs to the console, then we declare a variable, then we log to the console again, and then we assign a value to the variable. All 4 distinct like JavaScript execution moments.
If part of the code is using semicolons and part of it isn't,
That's fine.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so like I can put a semicolon here and then not the rest of the code. I still get so hello world, and then I print that undefined variable, and then I assign to the variable, and then I print the same variable, but the variable has a new value now. That works And then it also works at this moment, and then it would also work if I did it correctly. Like it all works. So just like, if you want to, just like forget about semicolons.
And if we're used to them, can we just?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Some people would be like, you should be using them and you're better
Like
for
it's
that.
stressing me out right now saying we don't need to use them.
No, go right ahead. Yeah, go right ahead. Sorry. All right, what's the other variable type that we mentioned? Const, and then left. So let's not worry about let. Let's just worry about const, okay? So with the variable type of var, it literally means variable. Like it can have a different value. Its value can vary. So like it will vary potentially over time. So it can start as one and then, or it can start as one value and then you can change it in your code and that's allowed. With const, it's constant. It does not change. It's always that value. And so it's pretty useful actually. Like if I'm doing, const user input name for like this contact form where they're giving me their name as well. Like it might make more sense for me to use a constant for that because like that value isn't going to change in the one distinct running version of that program. What I mean by that is like the same code is going to be running for like if I have 50 people that want to contact me, the same code's going to be running to get their name. And so like the value that's going to go to that variable is going to be different for all those submissions, but those are sort of separate running instances of it. And like for the code that I'm writing, I'm not going to reassign anything to that variable, like, or that constant. I'm going to keep it, I'm going to assign to it once and then reference it. And I'm not going to like, just like change it for whatever reason. Like it doesn't make any sense to change it. I want to capture that value and I want to reference it. And there's no reason for me to like assign a different value to it. So often variables are that way. And sorry, I know that's confusing that I'm using the same, like there's variable and then there's like the variable version of the variable and then there's a constant version of the variable. That's just how people talk. But typically it's better to use a constant if you can. So I would prefer constant. It's almost always what you want. And then there's a few cases where you'll need to use a variable, and we're going to learn about those later when we get to looping. That's when you need the variable. But that's not for at least a week. Okay, so I can do const user input name and then assign a value directly to it at that moment. And then what's nice about this is if I try to change it, I actually get an error. So what I mean by like you can't change it, you can try, but the program will throw an error or an exception. And that's what that red error is here, saying, hey, you tried to assign to a constant. So yeah, it doesn't mean that someone won't try to change the value. It just means that you can, as the programmer, can feel guaranteed that it's not going to change. So there's JavaScript, is a programming language, and there's like a specific set of things that exist in the language that are available to you. And one of the first like things you'll learn about that's like a piece of the language. So like if you learn like any other like normal language, like English, like there's like a structure and there's like, there's like verbs and then there's all the other stuff. Yeah, sorry.
But you can take
Anyways,
your
there's
first-
grammar and stuff, you know? And programming language has like a similar, there's like similar concepts and like things that are allowed and like ways that things operate. And one of the first things you'll learn about is what are called primitive types. So primitive types are kind of like the first thing that you kind of notice whenever you're learning language. And you've seen some of them already. Does anybody know some of the primitive types that we've seen so far? Boolean is a primitive type. There's one on the screen now. String is a primitive type. There's one of them is in the console here.
Our numbers.
Numbers are a primitive type. So there's ignoring the error, there's three things on the screen, string, and then what's the other one? Undefined is a primitive type, null is a primitive type. And that's all, right, sort of roughly. So yeah, there's just these very basic fundamental entities in a programming language. And it's those types. And like that's it. Like there's no other fundamental things like that. From there, you start learning about different like is there a question? Cool. If you're on and you're not actively trying to ask a question, just make sure you're muted. So beyond just those primitive types, you'll then like just learn about these other structures in the language that allow you to sort of control the execution flow of the program. So like you'll start learning about looping, you'll learn about declaring functions that can run at any particular moment, and you'll learn about branching logic, like do this if this is the case, otherwise do this. And you'll start learning about just ways that you can control the execution of a program and then modify and change data or change the state of the program. So yeah, the first kind of basic intro into the language though is learning the primitive types, and there's not that many. String, number, Boolean, undefined, null. So yeah, strings are meant to represent sort of any text content that, you know, isn't Boolean, which Boolean is just true or false, and then isn't a number. Like everything else is a string, everything else is a string. An email is a string, a name is a string. So when you're storing data, often a lot of things end up being strings. And then you don't do that much with strings besides hold information in them and then potentially like combine them. And so we saw the string concatenation stuff. So we might do like we might need to like give like a message to somebody in the string. And so the message like template might be like, someone might like hit submit on the form to contact me. And so you might like give them a success message that it worked or an error message. And so you've got like a base template for the success message, which is like, thank you for your interest. But you may then want to like modify the message to be more personal or something like that, or to like give them detail on what the error might have been if you have that information. And so I might try to make this a little more personalized and then do like string concatenation where I would say, you know, thank you for your interest plus, and then which variable do you think I'm going to use here? Like to get to say their name. Yeah. So user input name. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this yet, but typically when you're using VS Code, it's like trying to be really helpful. And so it thinks it knows what I want to do here because I'm typing a variable And there's only so many options that start with that in the current scope of the program. So the current scope of the program is just everything that is happening inside this script tag. Sorry, inside here. So that's like the scope of the program is everything available to you whenever you're running JavaScript, which is like just these globally defined things that are just always there in your execution environment. Console, if you're in the browser, window, like it was just like all of a sudden when I was like randomly just typing something in to do something, like that's just something that's defined in the execution environment. That's part of the scope. And then whatever you type is then part of the scope. So any variables you declare, any functions you declare are now also in the scope. So it's looking at the scope and it's like, well, you're typing user, so you probably want either this variable or this variable. And so like whenever I'm typing, it's guessing that, and then I can hit tab and it'll autocomplete it for me. So thank you for your interest. And then I'm going to concat. Notice I have a space at the end of this. Plus user input name, which is Zach Mays, with no space at the beginning, which is why I put it there. And then I might want to then end it with an exclamation point. And so this might be const message. And then I, want to log that message. I mean, not in the real world example, but just for working on that, go ahead and log it. Oh, and since I have that error, my program's messed up. It's not going to work. So I have to fix what I did, which was wrong. And I want to leave it there just so you guys have it for documentation. And so I'm just going to comment it out. So that like is there still, but it doesn't run since it's commented out. Cool. Yeah. So there you go. It's working pretty good. And then what's the other way that so this is, I'm doing, so I have string values and I'm doing, I'm doing operations on the string. I'm like changing and modifying the data. And this is one way to do it where you do the plus. This is the operator. Plus is the operator. There was another way to do this. Does anybody remember last class?
It's the $sign and the squiggly lines.
Yeah. So the I think backtick or tilde. No, yeah, backtick. And so we can do const. Better way to create message is with backtick. Needs and then do dollar and tilde curly brace, not curly brace. And so like everything inside the tilde is string, but then when I want to inject variables into the string, I can do the dollar curly brace. And then that way I don't do this kind of funky, like leave a space at the end of one for it and then like plus and then like plus exclamation point. Like that looks kind of silly. This looks pretty nice. So and it's like easier to kind of understand what's happening. So yeah, when you wanna like create a new string that's going to combine some sort of template-based message with potentially multiple variables. Like you can do multiple here. Like thank you for your interest user input name. We will send an email to your email, which is you wouldn't actually do this, but user interest email. And so like you can do more than one injection in there. And then you can see it should refresh.
You didn't change the.
Oh yeah. Ah, great job. Yeah. So this is like where like, hey, it didn't do what I expected. So that's called debugging. So like I was hoping the new message would show up, but it didn't, which you heard Dylan give you the answer, which is I'm still logging the message. I'm not logging a better way to create a message. So I'll just log both. Okay, so yeah, we see, we have strings, we can also do operations with strings. If we're using other types like numbers, so we may ask for, I don't know, their age for some reason, so. Const user input age equals 2. And, you can do a lot more things with a number than you can with a string, right? So like, depending on what primitive type you're dealing with, the language is going to provide you tools for things you can do with that primitive type. With a string, there's a certain amount of things you can do with a string. With a number, there's quite a bit that you can do with it. And like with a number, like you would expect to be able to do math. So you can do math with a number. And so with the user input age, I can do things like const years older than 21. But you don't typically see people put numbers in their variable names because you can't start a variable name with a number. Like you can't do that. Notice how it's making that white instead of blue because it's like that's a number. You're trying to type a number and then you put a Y at the end of that number. Like, why are you doing that? And so you can do it like this, I think, but people don't typically do that because of what I just showed you. So you might see them do like actually like this potentially, or like years above drinking age, if that's what I meant by 21. So it's better documentation. And so this would be, 32 or not 32, but user input age minus 1. And so like, yeah, I mean, if you know how to work a calculator, you know how to do all the stuff in JavaScript you can with a number. I mean, it looks exactly the same. So plus, minus, division, multiplication, it all works the same. And so you can like do whatever math you want. It follows the same order of operations as a calculator. You can use parentheses as well, like you would in math. And so you can like do those calculations and then you can just assign the result to any variable that you want. Yeah, so we're, and since user input age is a number, like whenever this code runs, actually, so let's talk about this for a second. So like what, so let me just console log this so we can see what we're looking about. Cool. So everything's looking good so far, right? So the order that JavaScript is like parsing this file and deciding, like the way that it's running and the way that it like reads the code that you write and like interprets it and evaluates it, is sort of like if you're using assignment, it's like right to left, and it's sort of like inward out in certain ways. You're not going to see inward out until we get to functions, but in this example here, the way that this line is ran, so we talked about how it goes top to bottom in a 2-pass system, but don't worry so much about the 2-pass system. Just assume it's top to bottom. And so we do console log, we do variable, console log, change variable, console log, blah, 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 blah. And then we get to this line, and this is like kind of interesting. Like, what's it doing here? Like, how does it run this line? So what it does is the first thing it does is it goes, okay, I'm going to evaluate what's to the right of the equal sign. So it's like going to do this first here. And the first thing it does is, oh, I got to get this variable, user input age. I need to find that. And so it goes, okay, do I have something in my scope? Which remember, scope is just like the code that's written here and then also the global scope. Do I have anything in my scope that is called user input age? Oh, I do. So let me replace what is there with that value. So this becomes 32. And then it's like, okay, cool, I'm done with that. What's the next thing I should do? Oh, okay, so they want to do an operation. They want to do the subtraction operation. So they're going to do 32 subtraction operation and then 21. And then that's evaluated to 11. And it's like, okay, I'm done with everything on the right side. Everything's been evaluated on the right side. And now I'm going to assign that value to the variable on the left. And so then it becomes years older than 21. It gets that value, and then we log it. You guys saw in the curriculum, like where you would like use a variable and then straight up change the value of that variable. So you'd see these really funky things. Like let's say I do var age that changes. Say 12. Like we saw in the curriculum, you can do stuff like what looks really funky at first. Like it's kind of mind bending, where you do age that change equals age that change plus 1 for my birthday or whatever. So based on what I just told you about how it evaluates things, this shouldn't freak you out that much anymore. Because when we get to this line, it says, okay, I'm going to look at the right side first, and I'm going to evaluate age that change to what it is, which is 12 at that moment. And then I'm going to do the plus operation on it and do 1, so it'll become 13. So the right side is now just 13. And then we modify age that change to become 13, and it becomes 13 at that point. But like, yeah, like referencing, like having the same variable on the same line, isn't that weird when you understand like the order that it's doing everything right to left. So we saw that. There was also like, if I wanted to do this, does anybody know the shorthand for doing it? If I want to just add 1 to a variable.
Age that change plus plus.
So you'll see this, age that change plus plus. Not really something you do very often unless you're looping. So again, like this like changing a variable is like not that common unless you're looping. And even and like there's better ways to do stuff than looping that so you don't have to modify variables that you'll learn about later. But yeah, there's all these things that coders like, so the language comes out, people start using the language, and then everyone's like, it takes a lot to type out this. Because like you're coding and typing all the time, and so you get annoyed when stuff like is like syntactically verbose. And so coders are like, dude, I don't want to type age that change equals age that change plus 1 anymore. And so the language is like, okay, well, like, what if we did like plus plus at the end of it, and then it would just do that same thing? And everyone's like, great, we'll start doing that now, thank you. And they just keep changing and making the language better. And so this is what's called syntactical sugar, meaning like there's like a base way to do it, but then there's like, which is like what's actually happening. And then there's like a shorter syntax for it that is less verbose. So we have that for adding 1 to a number, which you do a ton when you're doing looping. And sorry, I'll say what looping is so you at least have like some idea of what I'm talking about. So often we'll need to like do something undetermined amount of time. And so like we may need to, like if someone gives us a number as input for their age, like 32 or whatever, this isn't a great example, but we may need to then do something that many times. And so you can say like loop 32 times and then like stop looping once you get to 32. And so you'll like, okay, start at 0 and then add 1 each loop. So like start at 0, do something, and then add 1 to the number, and then start again, and then keep adding 1 to it. And then you just say like, once that number becomes the target number, stop looping. So like, that's where you'll often see these like add 1 to something is like in the case of looping. So we've got like add 1 to something, subtract 1 from something. And then you saw like the multiplication one, like you can do like multiple or divide. Never, ever done that before. It's like, I don't know what the use case is for that. So yeah, with numbers, there's a bunch of stuff you can do in the context. Like, so depending on the type that you're dealing with, there's like a context of operations that you can do.
with numbers, you can do math. With strings, you can do string concatenation. You can actually do incredible things with strings. Like in the programming language, you can like find patterns in the string, like find substrings in the string, loop through the string. Like there's a ton of stuff you can actually do with string, but most of the stuff that you start off with is just like making new sentences out of it. And then with Boolean, we'll learn about what you can do with Booleans later. But yeah, I think that's good intro to some of the primitive types. Now, you should sort of start seeing a pattern here of like kind of, you start seeing sort of a structure happening in code, which is you've got values, and then you have operations you're trying to do on those values, or you have like things you can do to values. So like we've seen you can subtract, you can add, you can combine, and then we've also been seeing these like funky things in the parentheses that I've called methods before. I've also referred to them as functions. So methods and functions, think of them as synonymous for now. That's just another way to operate on data. So you've got some sort of information, string, and then there's a way, there's like a method you can use to do a certain thing with that information. So console log takes the information you want to give it, string or number or whatever, and it will log it to the console. So it's an operation on data. And so, yeah, these programs are data or the state that you define. And then there's a bunch of operations you can do on the data. And then you can store, the third thing is you can store that information. So you can take the operation and typically you can assign it to a new variable to store it. So you can then use that as on a different operation. And it's just like a big chain of data in, operation, data out. And that's what a program is. And so you should sort of be kind of seeing that pattern happening here. Okay, cool. That's all the stuff I wanted to talk about. Any questions about any of that? Anybody on the call have any questions? How are we doing out there? Good. I want to give you all some love as well. I don't want to make it seem like the people on the call are not as important as the people here. So everybody's good on the call? Cool. All right, so we've got just a few minutes left. So we can start doing an exercise. And is it hopefully maybe is it okay if we go 10 minutes or so over on Saturdays? I won't do that on weeknights. But on Saturdays I'll typically go a little over if everyone's cool with that. And if not, like it's all recorded and you can check it out later if you need to go. Okay, so for the exercise, I wanted to show you guys the prompt thing I was talking about last time, where the browser like interrupts you and asks you for information. And we're gonna make like imagine you're like renewing your license online or something through the government website, and so you have to give them like your name and your age and your SSN. We're not gonna do the SSN part, but your name, your age, your address, and stuff like that. So imagine, we're making that website for the government, but we don't really know that much code yet. So we're going to use prompt because it's pretty easy to use. So we'll start working on that. So I'm going to make a new file here. This will be called license.html. And we'll add our HTML, head, body. And in the head, I typically will, I'll do at least a title typically, because that you can actually see browser. And then we'll have our body and we'll just, say. And then we'll add our script tag. I'll give you just a second for you to see it, Con. +1 enter. Okay. So, so this is going to be a really basic, silly license application where we're going to prompt and then we're just going to console log text art, or we like format a string in a particular way. It's really fun. So we will. So I think I know how to do this, but typically, like I would look it up. Like you look up everything you do because you don't actually remember anything. And so I'll do, browser prompt. And yeah, so you like Google stuff all the time. And it's like really, you can like type out what you're trying to do in Google and you'll typically get an answer like eventually you'll be trying to do something and you'll be like, how to get input or how to like get the value of an input field in JavaScript. Like you can type that and then there'll be like a decent search result for that. And you'll just get good at knowing whether or not because sometimes you can type something and you won't get anything good back. And you'll just get good at being able to kind of figure out like, oh, I need to like type something slightly different to get a good result. But this is like getting that developer.mozilla.org result is like a good sign. And then eventually Stack Overflow is a good sign. And then like Medium articles are also sometimes a good sign. So you'll just kind of know like, am I searching for something that's like kind of big or am I searching for something that's pretty small? And if it's pretty small, you'll typically want like documentation or Stack Overflow. If it's pretty big, you want like an article or like a Medium article or something like that. And so, but this is good. Window.prompt is what I want. And remember, window is that just thing defined in the scope already for us whenever we're running JavaScript code in the browser. Window is just a thing that is available to me. And so you do window.prompt instructs the browser to display a dialog with an optional message prompting the user to input some text and to wait until the user either submits the text or cancels the dialog. And then they show you how to do it. So a horrible example because result is not like, that should be var result. I don't know what this, anyways. So var result equals window.prompt. And then message is, message is a variable that they apparently defined above. Like, this is not a good example. I'm sorry. Because you're like, what the hell is message? Like, you're going to like paste this and it's going to be like, it's going to be an error, result not defined, message not defined. And you're going to get discouraged and then you're like, I can't get this thing to work. But like, just keep trying. But yeah, so message is supposed to be a string of like what you want the thing to say. And then I have no idea what that is.
It says it below.
Oh, that's cool. Here we go. Here's a better example. So, just keep scrolling down sometimes. Okay, but yeah, so let really should just use const. They're like reassigning to it. but it's so dumb to reassign to a variable. Just make a new variable. It's not the same thing. Like, it's not a good name if you're just gonna keep reassigning to it, you know? So anyways, so we'll do const, name equals prompt. And then, oh, this is cool, right? So VS Code is documenting, like, do you guys all have that where it's showing you prompt? So like, you can look up the documentation, but once you, oh, and also, I think I can say prompt without window.prompt, but technically I should probably do window.prompt. Yeah, so prompt, it's showing me, this is called the signature of the method. So we're calling a method. And you can tell you're calling a method or calling a function whenever you use the parentheses. And then this, what this is saying is that like this, I can't really show, yeah, I can. So like this is called the signature. And there's a particular way to read this. The first thing is just saying this is a method. And then the name of the method is prompt. And then it takes it takes two parameters. And parameters are separated by a comma. The first parameter is it's a variable called message. So parameters are sort of like variables. So there's two variables here, message and then default. And it's telling you that these are both optional. That's what the question mark is. They're both optional. So you can call prompt without giving it anything. But typically you would give it one or two things. So I can give it 0 things, 1 thing, or 2 things because there's 2 optional parameters. And then both of them are of type string. So I'm supposed to give it 2 strings if I'm going to pass both parameters. And then it's saying the return value is string. So if you call this, it's going to give back something. It's going to evaluate to something. And that's why I can assign it to a variable. The only reason I can do const name equals window.prompt is because prompt gives me something back, which is that string. And so what it gives me back is whatever the user types in the browser after they deal with prompt. So prompt, what is your name? And that's all I'm going to do for now. And then we're going to console log name and just see how this is going. So I can either, this is up to you. You can either just stop live server and start it again. Or you can try to like point it to the right place. So like right now live server is on in class.html. Like notice it's sort of like following a folder structure. And so I could change this to license.html. Or you could have like stopped the server and started again. I see, that's interesting. I was actually expecting notice how we were talking about this earlier. Notice how like renew your license, the heading's not on the page at all. There's like just the prompt, and then once I hit cancel, does it show up? So this is like the example where the JavaScript is blocking the page from showing up. I actually thought it wouldn't have done that in this case since it's below the H1, but I may have to move this out of the body tag potentially for that. No.
So this, I actually really like moments like this because this is where you can see like, I actually don't know what's going on right now. And so like, this is how I figure out what's going on. And like, it's like a frustrating process. And sometimes I'll just give up. Because like I'm not getting results that I expect from searching this, mainly because nobody uses prompts. But
I think it says it's handled by the browser and you can't control it, but if you wanna control where it shows up, you have to create like custom sections in your page and then pause the like dynamic display there.
yeah, so okay, let me be more specific about what I'm confused about. So I'm like I would expect the HTML renew your license to be there. Like, and then the prompt to be above it. And when we were looking at the page, the prompt, like there's nothing on the page. Wait, the page is white. And it's not until I put something that it shows up, which like is not what I'm expecting because the script is happening after the body. So actually I'm gonna try this defer thing. I don't know if that's the right sentence. Yeah, I mean, even if it's defer, it's still blocking the HTML, which I find odd. So yeah, you'll see this quite a bit is like you can actually like specifically tell your um, code to wait for the page to finish loading. So this is, remember how we did in the last class, we did add event, listener, or we're going to for like click and stuff like that. You can do the same thing for just the page loading and then have our code, like this code will only run once the page is finished loading. So we could potentially do that to fix it. I'm guessing something about prompt like works a little bit differently than other stuff and just having it show up before. But this is an area where like I'm not sure why, and I'm not familiar, but like prompt you really don't use prompt ever, so it's not like a huge deal, and I'm probably just gonna keep living my life not knowing why it does that. But we could fix it if we wanted to by doing that defer or by doing that window dot wait to load.
But just, that's gonna make the code more complicated because we're using functions like that, so let's just not worry about it for now. But anyways, so, yeah, so what we're trying to do though is, so we now have this prompt and we can put, our name in. And we're getting, now we're seeing, so we do that, the prompt happens, we hit OK, we assign that value to our constant, and then we log into the console, so we can see my name being added to the console. So like pretty cool, like you're taking input from the browser, and then it's like interacting with your code, and then like your code can then interact with the browser if you want to. And like it's not too much code to do that, which is pretty cool. So we can do, what is your name? And then I'm pretty sure like right underneath this, we can then prompt again and do what is your age? And then we get Zach 32. So the reason that works like that is because prompt like freezes the execution of the code until you hit OK. So it's like reading this JavaScript and then it gets to prompt. And you know what? I wonder. Yeah, we'll do it later. I know. I bet that's why we're not seeing any HTML because it's like totally freezing everything.
I found something that said that the browser, the entirety of the document comes before the loading, so when the prompt command comes, it's
Just freezes everything.
first.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we could. Yeah, we'd have to do that load thing to get that to work. But yeah, so that's why we can do this though, because like it gets here, it freezes, and it waits for us to type in something, and then we type it in, and then it assigns it here, and then it goes to this line, and then it just prompts again. So we can like change these prompts if we want to. So yeah, what's your name? What's your age? And then let me see if there's anything else I want to do. Oh yeah, what's your address? Okay, and then I don't want to console log it like that. I want to do, this is kind of fun. Like you'll see this a lot when we start getting into backend programming, when you're using like, this like cool black screen that you see people doing. Like, when we get to that for like backend stuff, you'll see often people doing this like printing in fancy ways to like have like images and stuff show up. So yeah, we can make like, border kind of thing, and anything that cool, but we can do. Something works. I don't know. So this isn't gonna look like you think because like the content that actually is gonna be there is gonna be different lengths depending on what I type in. So like you'd have to have like a pretty fancy program that would like how long is this string? And then I'm gonna add spaces based on how long that is. Like so this is totally doable, but like the code is gonna get more complex. So it's gonna look like crap right now, but we can make it look better once we learn more stuff. But then yeah, we can sort of do like a new one. So this like looks okay in the code, but it's gonna look like crap in the console. But that's okay. So Zach Mays, 32. Awesome. And then we get our, little formatted license printed there for us. But like notice since like these are these strings that got injected are different lengths. So like my like padding thing here doesn't work because of that. But like you can imagine where you write code that's like, okay, how wide do I want this thing? And like maybe it's like 32 characters or something like that. And then you would pass it this variable that's going to go here and like the other content that you have. And it would say, okay, like that used up like 12 spaces. So we'll fill in like the rest with whatever spaces we need. And so like that these things would show up in the right spot. But so yeah, now we're doing that in the console, but eventually what we can do once we learn more is we could take that information and then we could actually update the page itself. Like we could change the HTML of the page to show an image of the license or whatever we want to and inject that information and then say like, here's what's gonna look like, and then we'll send it to you or whatever. And yeah, so that's it for today. So we'll go over any questions, and then the homework is to continue doing free code camp. Again, if you need to find the homework, I'll post it in Slack, but it's also, if you go to our curriculum page, which is linked in Slack, and then just go to the day that we're on, I'll always put what the homework is here on this README. So you can see, here's what we've gone over today. Here's the exercise we just did, and then here's where you need to get to. So you'll do more of the free code camp stuff. And then I would suggest just like playing around with this license program that we just made. Like just tweak it, just change it, add a new field, like at minimum, add like one more field here and like get it to show up in the console log. Like just like get your muscle memory. Like you watch this and you're like nodding your head because it makes sense, but like when you're actually doing it yourself, it just feels different. So just like physically mess with this code that we've done. And then like super brownie points if you can add that window on load thing and have the page show up before the prompt comes up. Okay, all right, any questions? Tisk. Anybody online, any questions? Okay. All right, I'll see you all online Wednesday. And then